every year it's the same. People are dying, and the only thing that changes is homelessness gets worse.
So how do you navigate with an effective messaging strategy that's based on common sense, which moves the needle?
There's a whole range of questions on self-benefit being the motivator for their answer or altruism. Every question was scored, and then we started picking apart demographics. One parameter of demographics, those same people would have different answers. And we're like, there's more to be unpacked here.
Oh, this empathy message, it's not working.
In marketing, it would be what you thought was a key performance indicator is just a vanity metric. It's not doing anything for you.
If homelessness was a punishment for bad choices, we'd all be homeless. I am so excited to share this podcast with you. I have two big passions. That's smart marketing and solving homelessness. And when those worlds collide, that's my jam. Since 2008, Invisible People has been on a mission to change the narrative around homelessness, educating the public and influencing policy through innovative and powerful storytelling. Joining me are Berberian and Stephane Gringer, both partners at Chameleon Collective. Together, we created a data-driven, effective homelessness messaging advocacy toolkit to help you deliver homelessness messaging that actually works. We'll break down what we learned, why some messaging works while other strategies fall flat. And yes, we will talk about why empathy isn't always the most effective approach. You can find the toolkit along with all of our other messaging research at invisiblepeople.tv/toolkit. Finally, I have a marketing podcast. I'm excited because I really enjoyed working with you two. First, introduce yourself. I usually go right into the meat, but
I'm not a homelessness expert by any means.
Yeah.
I'm by doing this work though, I have a newfound lens and empathy towards everything and realize how complex it is.
Yeah.
My background is obviously in marketing. I started off as a creative director actually, and for the last 15, 20 years, I've been doing CMO roles, mainly B2B companies, a couple of consumer brands. But lately, I've been venturing into a lot of nonprofit work.
Yeah.
And I'd like to credit you, where somehow through the laws of attraction or whatever you may call it, work with you has gotten me involved in a lot of local resources and local community things in Key West, which has been great.
Cool.
So thank you.
Yeah, I'm proud to say that I'm a newbie, not a NIMBY. For the record, I'm a newbie to homelessness solutions. My bread and butter has been experience strategy work. So for many, many years, I've been a consultant, primarily for B2B service companies, often in financial services. So this project, frankly, gave me an opportunity to jump into something that was nonprofit, food for the soul. Yeah. I think, between Stephane and I, we felt like, hey, there's always the benefit of outside-in thinking. Perhaps we could provide this on this project and sort of see how it goes. Because the last thing we wanted to do was claim that we're something that we're not. So, hey, if it was a benefit that we could provide maybe a different lens of looking at things or a different lens of, pulling on a thread to get to where we need to go, then great.
Yeah, but, I think we always came into this with let the data speak for itself. Like we don't have any expertise on this. We're just going to approach it like a data project.
The beginner's mind.
Yeah.
Zen masters say.
Every time I do this is our third time, I have something in my head and I get nervous because what if the data proves me wrong, right? Because I do this day in and day out and I engage with as many people as possible every single day. So I understand the conversations, know a little bit about what works, but data is different. And when you go out to people and, do a survey like we did, it could come back and, Mark, you're crazy.
Yeah.
But before we go further, we're going to talk about, I know I said this is a marketing podcast, but this is a marketing podcast, a messaging podcast on messaging homelessness. And I have to thank Scott Monte, who
Absolutely.
I knew Scott Monte at Ford. I don't know. Do you guys know the backstory?
A little bit. We know you guys met. That's
right.
For
So
us.
I was going to do a road trip, and this was right when the '08 crash. There was a film company that was going to wrap an RV as an advertisement and then pay for me to go around the country. I had already started booking some speaking events and some different things, and they contacted me and said, the economy is really bad. We're not going to do it. And I have no income. I'm just doing all this on faith, if you would. And Scott was running a campaign with some newlyweds, a newlywed road trip, because I needed a car now, right? I didn't have a car. Right. So, back in the day when social media was really cool, you would start following people and, Ford and Scott, and I'd see this newlywed road trip and it had a landing page. So I reached out to Scott and I said, I can sell you more cars than they are. And then, connecting a big brand to homelessness, brands are usually risk adverse.
Risk adverse,
yeah. So a cause like homelessness, it's been a miracle that I've been able to, connect Hanes, Pepsi, Ford, General Motors, Ritz Crackers, so many brands to homelessness. But with Scott, then we became friends. And did several road trips. So he was the first person that I reached out to, and he connected me to you guys.
Yeah, well, thank you, Scott. Scott's phenomenal, yeah.
As homelessness grows, people are getting frustrated, and they're pushing for laws that criminalize homelessness, which will only make the problem worse. Invisible People reaches more people, educating them on homelessness than all other homeless sector nonprofits and campaigns combined. But we do it on a limited budget. We don't have the funding they do. We are mostly funded by individual donations. And now that the economy is struggling, individual donations are disappearing, and we need you. I get it. You might not have the money to donate. Many people are struggling right now. Please share our content, share our videos. It really matters. And if you do have some funds and want to help be part of the solution to solve homelessness, please visit invisiblepeople.tv/donate. Our important work stops without you. And one thing I really loved, and we just did a session, and I mean this sincerely, is I could tell that you guys were very much engaged with this topic because you were asking your friends. You would often say to me, hey, Mark, we talked to our community about this, and this is how they responded. And you started sending me, I have a bad habit, or maybe it's a good habit, of, I see something and I just send out an email going, I'm interested, you should be too. And you guys started sending those emails to me, and I'm like, wow. So let me start off by saying, how did this, we'll go into the toolkit, but how did this project change your perceptions on homelessness?
Where to begin? It's funny. So born and raised in New York, lived in the city for 20 somewhat years, moved out to the suburbs in Connecticut, and then now I've been spending the last 3 years in Key West. And I've kind of run the gamut of all these different, and we'll get into it, these little cohorts that we surfaced in the study. Personally, it's changed? I mean, obviously empathy. I didn't realize, I think, how many roads led to homelessness. And I think that's a big concern and education thing. And when we talked about it today a little bit, is that domestic violence, that's a huge contributor, fleeing domestic violence, all of that. Yeah. I didn't realize the percentage of how many people were on the streets because of not that I was in this camp of like it's their fault, but I didn't know how many things were unavoidable and out of their control.
Criminal justice system, foster care, drugs, mental illness, lack of affordable housing, lack of a living wage, racism, so on and so on. There's so many causes of homelessness.
Yeah.
I mean, echoing Stephane, I don't think my perception changed. I have certainly people in my orbit that are either on the verge of homelessness or have been homeless at times. So I think that I knew the reasons, but I wasn't entirely convinced that there was the right empathy for every profile. And I think that the community at large, if anything, I wouldn't say disappointed, but a little bit questioning why there wasn't maybe a deeper dive on profile-based understanding of needs and pain points. Because to Stephane's point, every person that's experiencing homelessness has a story, and there's a reason why they fell into homelessness. And so be able to map those reasons and then map the right support around that specific profile, I think would do everyone a great service, because it would drive more empathy for skeptics. It would certainly allow for easier conversations to talk about people that are fleeing domestic violence, the veteran, all the different profiles that we talk about. So, that's something that I feel like, oh boy, if we can, poke at a little bit more moving forward, I think it would certainly.
Yeah, I think the expression
good.
I kept hearing was whenever I'd have a conversation about the work, because we're kind of consumed in it, is when I hear somebody say, "Oh, I didn't realize. Oh, I didn't realize." It's like, oh, well, there's a problem right there. Is that education, awareness, everything? But it was also because I was trying to frame things in a context that they would understand based on where they were coming from. Right. Not to pigeonhole them as like a NIMBY or something else, but just knowing what would resonate. And we were kind of pressure testing some of our findings. Yeah. And it was amazing to hear, oh, I didn't realize. Yeah. Oh, so I was changing people's minds on a very small scale, not on your scale, but it kind of validated the work. And I was proud of that.
We were talking last night, and something struck me because I was trying to explain in the homeless sector, the social service sector, where we are at. Now that messaging, we've been doing it since 2008, but now it's popular in the homeless sector for the last couple of years. That I forget how you said it, is that we're not really looking or testing like you would an audience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I think so. I come from the field of user-centered design. I'm a UX expert.
That's so what you were talking about.
Everything is typically about the customer,
right?
Client needs, pain points, and then mapping those out across the journey. And if we're talking about marketing, we're talking about a marketing funnel. But if we're talking about experience broadly, we're talking about the end-to-end customer experience.
Right.
So extrapolating that to folks that are homeless, it's persona-driven solutioning that would seem to make the most sense because it works everywhere else.
And you're talking about the audience, not homeless people.
Both.
Right.
Really both, because that way, if we take a profile like the NIMBY profile, they have unmet needs, they have pain points. There's a reason for their being, and so to unpack that across the every moment in their journey as they're, let's say, fighting some sort of affordable housing development in their community, you'll be able to cut them off at the pass a bit more effectively. And then because the arguments will become more clear, there'll just be naturally more support.
Yeah.
Do you feel like this is something I wanted to explore, and I don't know how to go about it, but do you feel like the people who are in these diametrically opposed groups like the NIMBYs and everybody else, was there like a buildup, you think, to R's point, in their kind of life cycle journey to get to that point? Or was there like a Batman moment, Like there was a Batman moment, it's like,
It's a really good question. I think a lot of it is we have this belief of the American dream and bootstrapping.
Yeah.
Homelessness has changed. 40 years ago, it was, 3 hots and a cot, and you could help that alcoholic out.
Yeah.
A lot of it is faith-based organizations, and I understand why they do this, but they do fundraising, marketing that, where they show somebody who would stereotypically look like an alcoholic bum and say, for 99 cents a meal, you could save their life.
Yeah.
So what the story they're reinforcing is that all these people need is a meal and the Bible, and that was the predominant going out to the masses. I think all of that played a part. One thing the homeless sector has done really, really bad is educating the public. And we've talked about this a little bit, I would love to test this, because I've always felt it's like a 2-part process. Like you would first need to change what people think about homeless people. And then the second campaign would come in to educate them about housing and housing first or whatever. Like first, just do the straight on, they're not all drug addicts, or even if they are a drug addict, we met somebody the other night and, he had a sports injury, started doing pills, and then, met some girl that said, hey, this is better than those pills. And now he's an addict, right? So, a lot of people just point the finger without understanding how that person became an addict. So I think I would love to see if that is the process. Because, if you ask for more than one thing, you get nothing. So I've always felt that maybe as a marketing strategy, but obviously that would be more expensive too, right? Because you got to do 2 campaigns.
Yeah, worthwhile campaigns, but I've always wondered if it was kind of like, did the majority of that group who's so hell-bent on shutting down and criminalizing and sweeping and everything, did something happen to them personally, or was it like the straw that broke the camel's back, or was it just nature nurture? Is this how they've just been brought up, right?
Yeah. So one of the things that happened, and some people watching and listening might argue with this, but when HUD and the country transitioned from the shelter model or transitional housing to supporting housing first, many of those shelter providers and transitional housing and faith-based groups felt threatened.
Sure.
Some of them lost funding, and we created our own opposition. So support for housing first was growing, and they've been railing behind the scenes to share these other narratives, and now they're at the top, and now you got bad actors like Cicero Institute, Discovery Institute, Manhattan, Prager, and other Schellenberger that are pushing for criminalization, that are putting gas on the fire, if you would.
Right.
And they're very smart. They're playing off these harmful paradigms.
Well, it's almost like you can't put forth a housing solution until someone has proven that they've earned it to some degree, whether that be through religion, whether that be through cleaning them up, or whatever it is.
And at the same time, and this is one of my issues with, the homeless sector just doesn't seem to understand modern communication, where you have YouTube. If you type Kensington into YouTube, there's 7 live cameras right now. There might be 9 by now. Pointing at the street, live streams of people doing drugs. People are making $200,000 a month reinforcing these negative paradigms. And so others are doing, look, they're making money. All they're doing is shooting a camera on a window. That's low budget. We could do that and make money. So these negative, harmful beliefs are being reinforced. And, people don't pay attention, and it's all at the same time.
Yeah, a lot of noise.
Yeah. And one of the things, there's a couple of reasons I've felt as I've been doing this, and I remember, so I was in a meeting with the Interagency Council of Homelessness, which is one of the federal responses. The administration, I don't even know if they exist anymore. But I remember one of their regional managers or reps or whatever said that when she's talking to politicians, and she sounded desperate, she's talking to politicians on the West Coast, they're all saying homeless people are drug addicts. And she asked, how do we respond? And she needed an answer. And what I've been seeing in the homeless sector is very generic responses, all values-based. And there's a place for values-based, or altruistic is what we ended up calling it. And there's a place for that. So for several years, I've been trying to do this research where I wanted to create a toolkit that actually empowered people with some answers. And that's how this started. But it took me a while to find the right partners. The other thing that's happening is, and this isn't just in messaging research, and I'll use an example. They did research of what is the water source for homeless people in Skid Row. Like, do you have access to water?
Right.
And most people said yes. They never asked what that source is. And 85%, it's a fire hydrant, which is completely unhealthy.
Sure.
So in the homeless sector, they say, they asked in their research, are you housing insecure? Just assuming that somebody that's housing insecure is going to support housing homeless people. When I was housing insecure and I worked in outreach, I was against housing homeless people because I thought that resource might go to me. Right. So you don't follow up. And one of the things, and we'll segue into what we did, that I loved is that, and it was your suggestion, is we first tested a real small group, our questions, and it came back and you said, oh yeah, we got to change a couple of things, you know, and that was brilliant. And I haven't seen that in the nonprofit marketing, right? That even us creating the survey, we said, well, we could be wrong. We could be doing this from our own bias. And we found out we were.
Eliminating bias from the test design was, we spent more time designing the tests than analyzing the data. I mean, yeah, we spent considerable time analyzing the data, but designing questions that weren't, leading the witness, so to speak, or were misleading, and then also like showed a range of what you wanted to cover was the big challenge.
And one of the things that I'm very adamant about, and I still believe, is there's a lot of response bias in any of this stuff.
The funniest thing is there's a phenomenon that if you ask people about an issue that's important, they're going to lean trying to give the answer that the world wants to hear, right? So how do you combat that in the questions? And the last question in the survey was flat out, and we'll get into this, was do you find messaging that appeals to more community-based values, or do you find more compelling messaging that appeals to what you? And that showed us like the opposite to what they'd answer in the previous 30 somewhat questions. At the end, they're like, "Oh no, I'm all about solving the world's problems and altruism and this and that." And it's like, really, because everything that you have led us to this point has clues and otherwise. So we wanted to put that question in as like a kind of litmus test.
Yeah, and for me, I think research is important, but you also have to, there's intuition and knowledge, and are you practically engaging with people in these conversations to know if it works? So if there's messaging research or, public research on perceptions, it's at best a good guess, right? So don't take it as gospel.
It's never gospel.
It's never gospel.
Any survey has noise. Any survey has bias. And as much as you try and mitigate, sometimes you go where you try and mitigate against so much bias that you inject a whole new form of bias. I mean, how many biases are there? Like, speaking, there's at least
millions
26. There's
bias.
26 like codified biases that you can quantifiably mitigate against, right? But by doing some of those, you might inject confirmation bias, other biases. So there's a lot to navigate. So
and I have very limited budget. I mean, I have one staff, me, right? Someday I hope to have more money, and there's so much more we wanted to do with this that we can do with this, and we should do this research yearly. Hopefully that will happen. But why don't you walk us through the research and then the toolkit?
You start off with saying that we took an approach where we wanted to pressure test what we thought was going to get us to where we needed to get in terms of messaging strategy. So that basically encouraged us to say, hey, knowing what we know, having a hypothesis in place of the types of audiences that we likely are going to get, what are the questions that are going to suss out what we need to get from them. So some worked, some didn't.
Yeah. Well, it's important to note that your hypothesis that started this whole thing was that screaming about altruistic, these grandiose solutions is not resonating with people. Like, it gets people's attention, but it's not inciting anybody to do anything. Yeah. Once you talk about what's in it for me, that's when you said that's when people start paying attention.
And how I came there, not just the interactions, but I'm always frustrated that you're reading headlines and they repeat the same thing every year. And I did research on how many times, homeless people dying. And I have it all. We went back to, I think, 2019. And, it's homeless people dying in the cold, homeless people dying in the summer, mortality rate of homeless people. LA, it's 4 people a day. Then it's 5 people a day. Now it's 6 people a day, right? Every year it's the same. And you would think if people are dying, right, that would be the key to get to people's hearts so they would change. And the only thing that changes is homelessness gets worse. And then I went, oh, this empathy message is it's not working.
Yeah. The marketing, it would be what you thought was a key performance indicator is just a vanity metric. It's not doing anything for you. Yeah.
I mean, what's an interesting dynamic in play, which our study didn't exactly answer it, but something, to your point, we'd like to further research. There's really 2 tectonic movements in place. There is the fact that things are getting much more expensive across the board in terms of housing, cost of living, groceries. Everyone's feeling it. And so there's greater empathy or greater awareness of that pain. But at the same time, you have everyone also feeling like, where's my handout?
Right.
And those 2 tectonic plates are crashing against each other. So how do you navigate those 2 realities with an effective messaging strategy that's based on common sense, which moves the needle for the types of audiences that we need to be engaged so that we have the solution that we know works implemented. And
then you mentioned also funding has diminished in the last couple of years too, right?
Well, for us, we don't get, I'm grateful for the grant funding we do get, but we don't get enough to even hire a second staff so we can scale.
Right.
We grew Invisible People on individual donations, but when, every year the revenue went up 35% and then COVID hit. And the economy tanked, and now it's going backwards. So that has been really crushing us.
Yeah,
it's really interesting. Our first research, which is done better and cheaper than any other messaging research, and the design, right? I mean, it's it clicks all the boxes. I self-funded, and when I launched it, there was foundations that said, how did you fund this? Because I had approached them for 3 years and asked them, hey, let's do this. Let's do this. And they went and did their own. It wasn't as good as what we did, Change is hard. Change is hard for philanthropy. Change is hard for me. Change is hard for the sector. I mean, we've been doing this work since 2008, but it didn't even get the attention of the importance of narrative change till a couple of years ago. And now it's the big sexy thing, and they're doing all this other stuff. And I'm like, hey, we're reaching millions of people. We're over here. We know what we're doing.
You're doing it,
we built this audience. We're ready to go. Just help us scale. And, so anyways, thanks for, setting me up with all these great conversations.
Hey, I'm trying to prompt you.
Yeah, let's get back to the toolkit.
Yeah.
People are listening are going to want to know, well, what should I do to message?
So,
what are the insights?
So the thesis going in was that altruism messaging isn't impactful. Everybody should switch, and these are your words, everybody should switch over to self-benefit because no one cares about the altruism stuff. And we said, okay, well, that sounds logical. Now, so we spent time to design a test. We did it. 1,000 people responded. It was a good spectrum of people. So we started to look at it. So every question was scored. There's a whole range of questions on self-benefit being the motivator for their answer or altruism. And then we started picking apart, okay, well, let's look at demographics. So young versus old, left-leaning, right-leaning, because I think we flat out asked, like, Democrat, Republican, which way do you vote? So we looked at those. Then we looked at their housing situation. We looked at suburban, urban, all these different things. And when we looked at each one individually and we broke the whole respondent group into one parameter of demographics and then looked at another one, those same people would have different answers. And we're like, all right, this is something's, there's more to be unpacked here. And then when we started reverse engineering it and going through, we're like, okay, so it's not just, young versus old. It's young, urban versus, okay, wait, there's more. Young, urban, professional, college educated versus young, urban, no college education, low income. Like that's, if you just looked at where they live, you'd have 2 people in the same camp totally different values, totally different definitions of support services, different definitions of solutions. So the key takeaway was that you can't just take one demographic and split your audience up. You have to create these pockets of individuals that all share common demographics, these clusters, cohorts, whatever we want to call them. Our survey was only big enough to find 3 that were statistically significant for us to make a hypothesis that would lead us to more research to validate it. The 3 cohorts that surfaced in the data that we felt were compelling enough to be different from each other, but also help set the stage for further research, was we found the urban low-income group, and we found that their view of the cause of homelessness is both it's systemic, and then it's also the individual, and they want to fix everything, right? So this is like their mindset. This is why you lead with altruism, because they think, rising tide lifts all ships. I mentioned that earlier. Then we found the urban middle income, where they see it, and the urban middle income would be the young professional. She lives in the city, he lives in the city, they have a good job and everything. They encounter homelessness. They've never experienced it themselves, or not a degree separated from it, but they see it, they want to do well. They see it as a systemic issue, like they need to change the system. And then we found the suburban middle income, and this is what we talked about a little bit before, is they've earned it, they want to keep it. Their definition of safety and security means, can I walk, my grandkids down the street without seeing an encampment, or can I go to the grocery store without fear of being robbed? This is like public safety. They see it as the individual's fault. They want to fix the individual, not the system, because they think this is a series of choices that has led this person down this path of homelessness, because the only lens they have to go on is their own experience. And that's what everybody has, is you're going to lean back on your own experience. So if they saw, well, I have a nice family that I've built, and in a house that I've earned, and I have my own business, this and that, whatever, like I've made choices in my life to earn this, I want to keep it. So that person over there has definitely made some stupid choices. And this goes back to the earlier thing that opened my eyes, that I realized that a lot of homelessness is caused by domestic violence and abuse, and people fleeing situations that they had no solution for there.
I always say, if homelessness was a punishment for bad choices, we'd all be homeless.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And for those of you listening, you can go to invisiblepeople.tv/toolkit and follow along and download the PDF, or just look at the landing page.
Snackable insights.
Snackable insights. That's what we're going to call the next one.
Yeah. Well, I think this research led us to the insights, and it was eye-opening for all of us, I think. I mean, were you surprised at what we found? Because you're the one that had the whole
I'm
hunch.
not. I'm not at all. It wasn't a surprise.
Yeah.
How you broke things into cohorts was new to me.
Yeah.
Surprise isn't the word. It was more like, aha.
Yeah, so I guess what's interesting is, does the homelessness sector, because to us, segmentation and all this stuff, this is like what you do in marketing, right?
Yeah.
So it's almost like the marketing discipline hasn't permeated the homelessness sector.
Hasn't. And it's the nonprofit sector. It's not just homelessness. I was telling you earlier, I used to be very active in the nonprofit technology community, and it was the same thing. Mm-hmm. It was very much the same thing. For whatever reason, nonprofits are just behind. And one of the, I'm very lucky that, when I worked with Hanes and when I worked with Pepsi, I was working with Weber or Ketchum or 360i or all these amazing agencies. And because years ago, before it was influencer, I was this person that, was, I'm the first cause to ever speak at Twitter headquarters. YouTube gave me their homepage for a day. Scott Monte built a web page that picked up our videos on Ford Motor Company. Who does that?
Yeah.
Right? So I'm going to these marketing events, and you guys, marketers, are talking about data and consumer data in a way that I'm going, oh my gosh, this is brilliant. If you even use that in segmenting out the homeless population, much less the audience, we would be so far ahead. And that was 10 years ago, and they're still not even thinking about that. And then they go to nonprofit marketing agencies that just give cookie cutter stuff and don't even, That's the. Remember, the next one is going to be ah.
Yeah, that's the name of the next one.
I get so frustrated. I can't think. Words don't come, but it comes.
Well, why don't car companies just have one vehicle that they market and sell? Like, isn't there one car that should serve all the needs of all of their audience? Like, no, we have pickups, we have electric vehicles, we have sports cars, we have convertible. Why? Because people have different values and needs, and in marketing, it's jobs to be done and like things you got to take care of. Like, that's how we look at it, is through the lens of the consumer, and then roll it back to the product. So for here, it's not that we were looking at the data and going like this is it's not simple, and it's not something, but it's the basis of like all good marketing is like understanding your audience if you're messaging to, or else you're just, the only thing you're competing against is the volume of your yelling to the next guy.
I was very lucky. I forgot what Ketchum called it. For those of you listening or watching, Ketchum is one of the leading PR agencies. And they invited me, it was something internet, and it was a setup. On a panel, it was with Greenpeace and another who's one of the top creative directors in the marketing industry. Amazing panel. And the panel was about how to create a movement. And what the setup was, and the vice president at Ketchum, because it was for their clients, their big clients, right? It wasn't a public conference. Is that you really can't, build a movement. You might set the stage, but it has to happen organically, right? When you're talking about like the ALS challenge. And
you sound like a client who would come to us as marketers and say, so we want to hire you to make us a viral video.
Exactly. And that's what
which we've heard. Like, lots of times.
The reason he picked me is he had seen some of my talks and knew that I'm brutally honest and that I would say, you can't create a movement. Right? You can set the stage, and that's what he wanted other people to say to his clients in the room. Yeah. Right?
Okay.
And that's what's happening now. So like you use the car example, is marketers use data to pay attention to trends, to pay attention to how consumers are responding to different messaging. And the homeless sector, looks at and says, oh, that's a cool meme. We should be doing memes. It drives me crazy, literally insane, that people are being taught to share cliche phrases as gifts. Like, that's what you're supposed to do. Right. That just creates noise.
Well, is it GIF or GIF? That's a whole different
That's
conversation.
Is it unhoused or homeless?
Exactly. But there's also right now is that if you text somebody a meme or a GIF, I say GIF, I don't say GIF, because it's graphical is the first word. Anyway, then that's like for Gen Z and all Gen Alpha, like all these kids, they're all like, we're boomers now to them because they don't speak in memes and GIFs and everything. And they, they've got their own unique way of speaking. But as marketers and especially as marketers trying to help out the homelessness sector, it's like you can't talk to everybody the same. It can't just be like, GIFs is like what we're doing now. Yeah. We're going to buy all in on GIFs and memes, and that's our new marketing strategy for the year. It's like you're alienating everybody else.
Homelessness is solvable. Homelessness is solvable. Homelessness is solvable.
Well, that's an interesting thing, because I kept hearing that today, that homelessness is solvable, and you had that in your presentation. But I think that plays into another thing where it's almost the virtue signaling, where it's like, I can contribute to something that's so insurmountable and vague and esoteric of a concept. Homelessness solvable. Like, how do you solve? What's success look like? Nobody being homeless? Never going to happen. Well, so I'll contribute. I'll look like a hero. I'll feel good. I'll Instagram my donation, things like that.
Well, it comes from, and I'm sure somebody did research someplace, that the biggest issue is the public doesn't believe it's solvable.
Exactly.
So the response was, let's just shove it down their throat. Homelessness is solvable. Okay, if that is the paradigm or the message that you want people to get, tell stories about how it's solvable. Just doing a graphic of housing as a human right doesn't change anybody's perception. It just creates noise.
And it's solvable at what cost to me? I mean, they're filling in the next sentence.
Right. They're not, it's
not
just
like,
that.
It could be solvable. Sure, I'll buy that at face value, but what's the cost to me to solve it?
Right.
And I'm not eating the cost, sorry.
Yeah. And that graphic I showed in the presentation was it. That was it. It was just homelessness is solvable. Nothing else.
Right, but what is this, like, solution can come in many flavors, right? Like if I went and I did, and I'm not going to name the names of who you pointed me towards, but like if I rented an airport hangar and took all the homelessness people in one zip code and threw them all under there and said, you guys have 30 days, you can live in this shelter. I'm just giving you a roof over your head because that's what everybody deserves, and I'm going to give you a sandwich every day. Did I just solve homelessness? Because technically, nobody's living in the street. They have a home, it's a roof over their head.
And I got to stress that it's really good people with well intentions. It's just somehow they have leaned into, I believe a lot of it is the nonprofit marketing agencies that are driving some of this. Just people, the corporate communicators in the nonprofit. I tell people, yes, you are dealing with politicians, you're dealing with bureaucrats, other nonprofits. You still need that corporate communication person.
Sure.
But if you're going to reach the world, the audience, people, the public, hire a content creator, somebody that knows how to build an audience, somebody who knows how to, create a story that engages the people, that they remember what you're trying to communicate.
Mark, have you considered running for language czar for the homelessness?
Oh gosh, my words, my brain doesn't work correctly.
You need like the glossary of terms, the unified, like everybody, it's like the Oxford Dictionary for all the terms in the sector.
Well, it's never like with the homeless, unhoused, all this, and it's
housing first. That alone, we found in the day that people had different definitions.
Right, and we still push that.
Yeah.
And there's sessions, how to message housing first, and that's not, I'm sure it might come up in the Q&A, but it's, well, let me go back a little bit, because that is something that needs to be researched by people like you that know how to research the public.
Well, it's a concept, it's not a solution.
Yeah.
Right? So, I mean, it's an approach is what I should say. Yeah. Housing first is an approach, but what the word housing in that term, that has like a myriad of understanding between all different people, whether you're like high income suburban or low income, poverty line in urban areas. Like housing first means nothing.
It has so much negative attached to it these days that it really needs a PR strategy. Do we start using something else, or do we, maybe invest money into educating the public on what this actually is? But one of the things that I say is very controversial, because the best way of messaging housing first is fixing housing first. Because the opposition, the Cicero Institute, they latch on to the failures, and if you actually fixed it, that's the best messaging, because then it would scale in communities and it would message itself, and you wouldn't have to even have all this, how do you message housing first? Fix it so that it scales. Yeah. That's easier said than done, because you have to have political will and public will.
Right. But is the main thing there that housing first is the general consensus that like you can't fix all the other issues an individual has leading them towards homelessness until you give them a safe space to call home and everything. Then everything else will stick. Well, if you try to enforce all the reform and all the rehab and everything else while they're still not feeling in a safe space, it's not going to stick.
My friend Ian says, recovery works best when somebody wants to recover.
Sure.
So majority of addiction, people are trying to escape pain. So you have to treat the pain. What is that trauma that they're trying to escape from? Yeah. Right? They just think, well, we're going to treat the addiction. We're going to just force them into, some kind of treatment or a shelter. But the number one pushback against housing first is they, and the negative have done really great in reinforcing this is, they just give them free housing. There's no accountability. They can do drugs in the housing. And then they play off that without any other that, yes, they're now in housing and it's their best chance to get off drugs. And treatment and mental health is supplied. I'll be totally honest. For many years, the homeless community didn't even want to message that housing first came with treatment. They were afraid that the public, that the people would not understand that it's up to the person's choice. So they didn't want to even say it. And that's hurt. Like, and what we need, if I was a foundation, I would hire somebody like you guys and create a national or a local campaign that educated people about housing first, that it does come with treatment. And it's the best chance somebody has to get sober because, you know, sorry, you guys get all my passion points. You know, when somebody goes into treatment, if treatment is available, when they're exited back outside, they drink and use again, unless there's housing. When somebody goes into jail, when they come out, they're homeless and now they got a criminal record, so they can't get a job. So housing plus treatment is...
I think also, I mean, just there should be sincerity and honesty around let's talk about mental health, because we're still in the Stone Ages when it comes to mental health treatment. So even though there's availability to treatment, doesn't mean it's quality.
Right.
And part of the problem is just, again, there isn't that acknowledgement that there's no perfect answer here, people. We're not trying to even claim that there is a perfect answer, even through housing plus treatment. But it's certainly better than the alternative, which is proven to not go anywhere for either the people or the community.
Yeah, that's it right there.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, how do we segue into how to message this stuff?
Like,
and you went there.
Can I drop this mic somehow?
Yeah. So a couple quick, we went long, but that's great. This is an important conversation. A couple quick tips on how to message altruistic or, personal benefit. And we could even talk. We
where to begin?
We had a bunch. We were saying individual benefit, or we went back and forth on many of these terms.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's everybody jumps to the tactics of, okay, how do I do this? It's like you have to understand the strategy first. Is your audience is complex. You're not just barking at the masses one message. It's how do you take your audience, understand, and it might not even be like, we found 3 cohorts in our study because that's what the data surfaced that was significant enough for us to kind of base our work on.
Yeah.
If we surveyed 10,000 people, I'm sure we're going to find subsets in these that contradict the larger group. I mean, you can infinitely go on until you end up with cohorts of 2 people, right? Because no one shares exactly 100% the same viewpoints as the person next to them. Even if you're in the same family, it doesn't matter. There's always something that's going to differ. But it's understanding that you need to be nimble with your nimble with your messaging, and understand that in some cases you're going to want to lead with altruism to get people's attention because that's what they typically gravitate towards, but then close it with some self-benefits. And in some cases you're going to want to lead. Yeah, you're going to lead with self-benefits, and then you're going to just wrap it up with altruism, to kind of close the loop. But there are different strategies, different segments that respond towards things. I mean, if you wanted to just blanket it, you can say that the suburban middle high income people, you want to lead with the self-benefits. That is driven by them, and this is a generalization, of course, but them, 2 things. One is they've gotten to where they are, home ownership, that's a big factor, by seemingly they've earned it, right? So they want to protect what they've earned. Then you've got someone on the flip side who's young, they're in an urban environment, they maybe came close to being homeless, they're all about, community support services and everything else. They feel that if the community gets involved as a whole, then they will reap the rewards of that because it takes a village kind of mindset, right? But there's still, within that, there's also definitions you have to navigate around, and that's a whole different conversation. Yeah. But I mean, if you just want to kind of say, how do I take the data and at least do something with it at the stage we're in now, that would be it.
Yeah. That's it. I mean,
that's it. That's it.
Yeah. Did I just finally get there?
Hopefully we'll be able to raise the funding to do some more. Let me just say invisiblepeople.tv /toolkit or /2025 research. They both go to the same landing page. Download the PDF or just read on the landing page.
I think one thing to really get through why this research is so important to continue on is because, for one thing, it was a small sample set of the entire U.S. So we need to go wider, but also to do this every year, we start to see the changes in perceptions, which brings me back to is like, well, what does success look like? Look at the impact we're having. So if we know that people are taking these strategies and implementing them, and then we look at the cohorts who are, stingy on changing their minds, this and that, and we've gotten them to open up, to understand more and do more, then you've got a longitudinal year-over-year progress impact report on this work.
Well, thank you guys. It's been wonderful meeting you, getting to know you a little better in person.
Meeting you face to face.
And we did the presentation today. There's rumors we might be doing a couple more. So
look out, world.
Yeah.